Well, you're not at Dennis Springs High School no more, so.
Yeah, that guy's gone.
Yeah.
So it ought to be up right now. Says I'm live and for 4 seconds.
I never got anything on YouTube. I don't know.
I don't either.
There might be notifications.
Facebook's live because it's got its little red dot up there to let you know it's doing its thing. YouTube is live because it says you got an excellent connection and the clock's going at 42 seconds already. So it may take it a while to.
Oh, I might have a.
Who knows? Maybe they don't like it, so they take it down. Maybe they're sending an email somewhere that I'm not getting that says
It's possible.
they did it before. They kept canceling it because it wasn't appropriate for children. Whatever that meant.
Right? It's whatever they say it means. That's why the rules are so vague.
Yeah, that's the key to having rules, is make them as vague as you can. That way you can make them whatever you want to make them.
Yep.
That's what most churches do.
Are you going to stream your Job series?
I'm guessing. They streamed last week.
Well, other than Sunday.
That's all I'm doing. I'm just going to preach it.
Oh.
I'm going to preach it following, as best I can, I'm going to follow what's in the Sunday school material.
Okay. I thought you said that you were going to go through it in your class.
No, I'm going to carry on with what we're doing. Job's hard to. It's hard to do in a class because
a lot of interpretation.
Well, so much of it, there's phrases and words in Job that don't appear anywhere else. Mm-hmm. I mean, not even. Well, look who's here. Not even in extra biblical material.
Girl,
So
I thought your daughter was going to attack me.
She might.
She's so cute.
I don't want anybody to see that, but it's delicious. I said, told Roland,
is that my secret stash?
yeah.
All right.
I told Roland, I said, I bet he hadn't even had supper yet.
I haven't had supper
But
yet.
this is it.
I didn't want everybody
I'll
to see.
take it.
I didn't have enough to bring to everybody, but I said, I know he didn't eat because he goes get those kids.
I didn't even have to get them tonight.
No kids?
No,
The van's gone.
I still haven't eaten.
What's the matter with man? It's broken?
No.
Well, they got it at youth camp.
Oh,
Where do you go? You listen?
I went to Abram last night.
Okay.
Mom's
Hey.
if I see her on the way.
Well,
Do you have the key to the refrigerator?
So I put it on top of the box when I put
so
the
there's
box
not going to
back
be any extra
I didn't
kids
see it.
tonight?
Anyway, I had to unplug it Sunday night. Okay. Yeah, I had to unplug it because the freezer door wouldn't shut. And I defrosted it, but I don't know if there's any water that ran down into the...
I didn't see him.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, those look good.
Somebody had
Mr. Mark,
Yes, ma'am.
I bought me a brand new Bible.
All right.
And I better be able to keep up with you because I hate returning. I keep my other Bible. I don't know.
Well, we'll do our best.
Well, I mean, my other
What?
little friend.
Oh, yeah. Well, that'll get you. I know I bought one that I love, and the print's six point.
I
But
don't know what mine
it's
is.
got all the notes I ever dreamed of having right
I
here.
got this
So,
note.
yeah.
So what kind? Who made it?
This is the New English translation. It's published by Thomas Nelson.
Oh, the Nelson Bible. That's a good one.
Yeah.
This is plain old King James.
Yeah. This was something that
well,
was...
you can't keep up with that anyway.
Oh, yeah. She can.
I have an expositors Bible at home.
That's a good Bible.
No, Fallon said she saw me put the key back in the safe last week.
I don't know where it is.
Mom has one on
That's
the
that's okay. I just wanted to open it up tonight so I could if there was any water in the bottom of it, I was going to clean it out.
Oh, I know there's water bottles. I don't know if there's water.
No, I mean water puddled in the bottom
You
because
leave it unlocked?
yeah, just check it. Just check and see if there's water in the bottom, and then I don't care. We'll have a vending machine next week, and won't be a problem.
Me and Angie were doing something. Somebody had thrown bags of ice in there. It looked like they were half melted. And then they set a bowl of ice water in there.
There was it was Sunday night.
And like half the
I went in
bottom
there
of
to
it
get
was frozen.
some ice to see if there was any ice because I wanted ice water because I was thirsty after 2.5 hours of talking. And the door wasn't even shut. The ice had built up all the way around the edge of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was like one big block of frost in there.
Yeah.
And so I unplugged it and I pulled all that I could get out of there and pretty much got 99% of it out of the freezer. But I don't know what was in the bottom because it could have been frosting up too, or probably wasn't cooling because
It was frozen.
yeah, I forget what they call that little piece that
It's
goes
like
from the top to the
it's like a
bottom.
transfer.
It was
That's how
frozen solid.
That's how your fridge gets cold is from the freezer.
Yeah,
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, my fridge is in trouble then because the freezer is like
Yeah.
chocolate block full.
Yeah.
You can't put nothing else in there.
Yeah, they don't recommend
Yeah.
filling as much as you can put in
yeah.
there.
You want to leave the fan where it can.
Yeah, I
Draw.
told my son that, but we got grandkids and they want us to put
Anyway.
popsicles and-
Yeah.
All right, so still nothing on YouTube, huh? I don't know how Nikki and them are getting it because she doesn't do
I know it's
Facebook.
working because Mary Ann watches it on YouTube. Yeah, she watches Sunday.
Yes, sir.
It's got water in
It's
it.
got water, but it's not like deep. But like the bottom of the cardboard of the root beers is soaked.
Yeah, I'm gonna just leave it unlocked, and after I
I
get
did. It
through,
looks like it's locked, but it's unlocked.
okay. Hopefully, I'll have time to do that before I leave. I gotta
I'll
go.
do it.
Will you?
Yeah.
Because I gotta go to Sunshine's after this, and then
Well, don't worry about it.
and then I gotta go
I'll
check
take
in a sober living guy.
I'll take care of it for you.
Thank you.
Where
I'll
you
come
at?
take her to mine.
What is using?
I'll come take care of your ice cream.
Yeah, this thing's all messed up. All right. Well, I saw Brandy, but we're going to go ahead and try to start because I got a whole new thing I want to go through tonight. And the reason why is most people get bored to death when you get to the point in 1 Kings and 2 Chronicles where you start talking about building the temple. They're looking at all the dimensions and all the stuff, and you're thinking, why is this stuff important? And for the most part, it's not anything theologically important. It's a record of what Solomon decided to do. In fact, there's no direction from God really to Solomon. Yeah, not like the tabernacle. David had some ideas about it, and it loosely shares the same dimensions as the tabernacle. And then, but there's a few things that do matter. But we're gonna discover the reason why they matter by going backwards rather than looking at the text. So, are you cold?
Well, when the thing's blowing right on me.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Sorry about
You
that.
got me on your bones, so you know
Don't be
how
sorry,
much
it feels good in
I'm
here.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go on that.
Yeah, it is heavy.
She left you.
I mean, it's on the phone. It's cold.
He's like,
All right.
I said you left her. He's like, I don't care.
Well, when he gets
All
cold,
right.
You already said that.
I'm over there, snuggle up. He gets cold.
So as we begin, hey Brandy, and we look at. Sorry. We're looking at 1 Kings. We're just gonna use it as a reference point. We're not really gonna look at it very much at all. There's only 2 passages that I want us to pay attention to as we look at what Solomon is doing to build the temple. One of those is So we start in verse 5, and it talks about, well, we talked about Hiram last week, did we?
What chapter?
King of Tyre? No, we didn't. No. Okay. So it's chapter 5. Anyway, this whole thing is a description of Solomon building the temple. 5, 6, and 7 pretty much cover Solomon building the temple, and he leaned heavily on Hiram. Or it's got a different name in First Chronicles. It's instead of Hiram, it's Huram. Same king, from the same place, Byblos, which nobody knows where that is, or even what the word really means in Hebrew. So it's one of those weird things that occurs. And Solomon really leans heavily on Hiram. He was a good ally, friend of his father David, and has got a lot of skill in Tyre. Stone cutters, people that can work with bronze, metalsmiths. So Hiram is pretty much the subcontractor for building a lot of the temple, and for return, Solomon agrees that he's just going to provide all the food for Hiram and his country while this is going on. 11 years it took to do all this. Okay, so that's kind of the backstory that's introduced in the first 15 verses of chapter 5. So a lot of this is just giving dimensions on how things are built. Okay, but what is, it's kind of modeled after the tabernacle. And if you remember how the tabernacle was built, it had a general area where the people would kind of be able to gather and see, and then there was a separate area where the priest would go to do their whatever they were going to do as a part of worship. And then there was the most holy place where the Ark of the Covenant sat. Okay, and there was a lid on that had cherubim on the lid and that kind of thing. Okay, so what Solomon has designed for this, and we're going to talk more about the Holy of Holies and the sea that we'll look at here in a minute. But the Holy of Holies was this place where no one went but the high priest, and that was once a year for the atonement of all the sins of the nation. And he built these 2 huge, gigantic cherubim. So they were like, their wingspans were 15 feet across each, so 30 feet across. And the wings met right where the ark would sit under there. Okay, and then inside this Holy of Holies was gold. I mean, everywhere gold, so that you would shine, you would glisten when you walked in there, because the high priest was wearing particular clothing that was bright linen with all these jewels on it, made to look bright. So there was this glistening, dazzling light that was going on inside this Holy of Holies. Okay, and then they would go in, like I said, once a year, offer the sacrifice. That's the only time anybody went in there.
So where do you think
But we're gonna look at all that.
Oh, okay.
I'm really fixing to leave this. I just wanted to give an overview.
Okay.
As in chapter 6, verse 11, it says the Lord's message came to Solomon. This is the second time that God has spoken directly to Solomon. Remember, the first time, it's when he's able to ask for anything he wants. Remember, he goes to the tabernacle tent, and he's there worshiping, and God meets him there, and he says, what do you want? And he asked for wisdom, and God was so proud of him for asking for wisdom and not for long life and riches and all these other things. So God gave him wisdom, and he gave him all those things. But he only got the long life if he did what God told him to do in his law. See, and it's the same thing here in verse 11 of chapter 6. The Lord's message came to Solomon. As for this temple that you are building, if you follow my rules, observe my regulations, and obey all my commandments, I will fulfill through you the promise I made to your father David. So before, God said, if you follow my rules and regulations as your father David did, I'll give you long life. And now God is connecting those two things together. If you follow my rules, observe my regulations, and obey my commandments, I will fulfill through you the promise I made to your father David, meaning that his line would go on forever. So not just your life is going to be secure in this promise I'm making to you, but this is the progeny. This is the line that I've promised David. But it's conditional. God doesn't play when he decides that he's going to have things a particular way. We don't get to change the rules along the way. Do them our way. If you are hearing me and doing what I say, this is all going to work out okay. All right. So he goes through this period of years. He builds the temple. He builds the palace, and a part of the the temple that he's asked Hiram to construct, we find in chapter 7, verse 23. And I want to just mention this because this particular artifact that is being built and used in the temple, Ezekiel looks past, and when he is providing his prophecy, this becomes a part of it. So I'm just going to make a quick reference to it. Then we're going to jump way back to Genesis and begin to look at some things. So he says, then he made a large bronze basin called the sea. It measured 15 feet from rim to rim, with a circular in shape, and stood 7.5 feet high. Its circumference was 45 feet. Under the rim, all the way around it, were round ornaments arranged in settings 15 feet long. The ornaments were in 2 rows and had been cast with the sea. Okay, so we're just going to stop right there, because this, I could go on and read the whole thing, but what I want to get to is that the sea was there to purify the priest. They washed in this big bowl that's 7.5 feet deep, and it's 15 feet wide. Held all this water, and that was where they purified themselves in order to do their priestly duties. Okay, all right. So in Ezekiel, when he starts talking about life flowing from the temple as a part of his prophecy, he says that the water of life will flow from the southeast corner of the temple down through Jerusalem. Okay. The sea, when Solomon built it, was in the southeast corner of the temple. So through time, this became more than just a ceremonial washing that was happening. This was the washing that people would receive that would provide them with life. Okay. So this is one thing that becomes very symbolic, but it's more than symbolism. And just looking at this little portion, reaching all the way to Ezekiel, I want us to now look back and begin to examine a little bit about what the temple is and what it means to be a priest in the temple, rather than going through all of this. This is this long, and this is that long, and this is this wide, and this is that wide, and it's made of this, and it's made of that. I want us to look at what it is that made a temple so important. Why would you say that a temple would be important?
They could go on to their God.
Okay. So a temple could be in any culture. It is today. You got temples, Hindu temples, Buddhist temples, other kind of temples. And they usually have a statue that represents Buddha, or I don't even know what the thing is called in Hindi. What's it called? I should know that.
I can ask. I could friends
Anyway, but in the temple there's this inanimate object that is a part of what reminds them or focuses whatever's going on there. It's in a temple. Okay. When we begin to look at temples in the Bible, we can go all the way back to God placing man in the garden and find the same image for God's temple that he is constantly preparing his people to be to build or to have or to interact with. So when when we look back in Genesis 1 and 2, we see that God makes everything, okay? He does that by His Word. He speaks, and everything that's there seems to obey what He wants it to do, and it comes about. And He continually says how it's very good. And then one of the things that He does is He creates a garden that is a part of that is set apart by cherubim, okay? These winged land creatures that sit there. So we begin to get this picture where this holy space is where heaven and earth are supposed to come together, okay? And in this coming together, it's a place where God is able to be God, and who He has created, male and female, in His image, okay? He can begin to relate to them in this holy space so that the life that He wants to share with them is the very life that He's had planned all along through this creation. Okay? So there is Eden, this holy space. There's trees that are untouchable, that you can't go to, that belong to God. But He wants you to have life. He wants you to have knowledge of good and evil. But He wants to be the purveyor of those things. So He says, it's here, but don't grab a hold of it yourself. Don't pursue it yourself. Okay? But everything else is yours. All right? And they're naked and unashamed. Okay? So they're functioning in the garden, first of all, as king, really. All right, first of all, they're made in the image of God. There were other cultures at that time who, if they had a temple, in that temple was a stone statue or a wooden statue. But when the Hebrew Bible begins to talk about there being an image in this holy space, it's an animated. It's us, made in His image. We're the off-bearers of Him. Okay? So we're not just something that God just imagined up in His mind as going to represent Him in His creation. We are as He is in the ways that He intended for us to be. See? So in that, as God is over all, relates, loves, cares, all these different things, Adam and Eve perform those same functions. So they do it as king of creation. And why would I say that they're king of creation?
Because they're in control of all the animals, life, whatever they want to do.
Yeah.
with it.
They're to take the land. They're the work the land. They're to make more of it than what is there already. God gives them permission to subdue it. It means that there's some wildness about creation that God has given them the ability to tame and to make useful. Okay, same thing that He did at creation. Everything was kind of chaotic, and His Spirit comes across and brings order and peace, in a sense, to everything. So they have the same role. So they're king. How might they be a priest? A priest being one who mediates for God and for whoever God is wanting to bless. So in the garden we find God said, what? Let us make man in our own image. In the image of God, He created them, male and female. He made them. And then what's the next line? And He blessed them. So in this holy space, we have blessing. That's what God's about. That's His business. He creates and He blesses. And He allows for us to do some of the sort of the same things. We subdue. We make good use of the land. Okay? We tend to the animals in the way that He directs us to do that. In fact, in Genesis 2, to name something means you have power over it. We use that same kind of argument today in counseling. If you can name it, you can tame it. Okay? So when you can name your problem, you're able to take care of your problem.
So, this kingship is more or less given to Adam. She don't have much to do with being priest and all that. You told me
Well,
he was a priest too.
we're gonna see, because there's three ways.
Putting all that stuff in- don't go-
Well, listen, there's three ways that this happens. They're prophet,
While he's talking.
they're prophet, priest, and king. Okay.
Go on with what you were doing.
All right. So they're king. They're given this job together. The blessing comes to both. Okay. So they're not separated. If you've ever heard me do a wedding, I make big noise about that. That God blesses the pair together, and they've been joined together. Nothing can pull them asunder. Nothing but God. Okay. So they're together.
You should have done my first wedding.
I should have. I don't know what Roland would think about that, but.
Well, I wouldn't be married to Roland. I'd still be with
So, all right. So they're king. They're also priest, because God is blessing them, and they're going about their business, their work as human beings. Okay. But then they're also prophets, because they've heard the word of God, and when you've heard the word of God, you can't help but share the word of God, because the words bring life. The words have already proven to bring life. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. That's how John describes it. But Genesis 1 says, out of the mouth of God says, let there be light, and there's light. Okay? So everything, the words matter. So they have all three of these roles that they are accomplishing in this holy space where God planted the garden. Okay? So not all the earth is the garden. There's this holy space that is the garden. Okay? But what happens in the garden? Okay? The serpent comes along, and what does he do with the word of God? Yeah, he twisted it, didn't he? Okay? And who speaks up against that?
Nobody there.
Nobody. Adam and Eve. They knew what God had said. They could have said to one another, let us not listen to the serpent. We've already heard what God says. He says not to eat of this. Could have gone on, but they didn't. They were silent on the matter completely. So the fall of man occurs in this holy space when they choose to just forget what God said. All that they can come up with is, well, it looks pretty good to eat, and it'll make you pretty smart. So we're going to do it. Forget everything about what God said. Now we're working in our own purview. Now we're God. Okay? And so now we've got to be prophet, priest, and king for us, but we don't even know how. There's not even a way for that to happen. And the minute they do it, the priestly clothes that they've had are now shameful clothes. Because they've broken every rule about what it means to be the presence of God in the world, because they haven't done what he said. Okay? And so we know the story. God comes about. He's looking for them. Oh, we hid, we're naked. Who told you you're naked? You know, the whole deal. He knows, but we're at this place now where what happens? They're removed from the garden. So in the holy space, God does what? He blesses. But now they're being removed from that holy space. And outside of that holy space, there's curses for what has happened. There's the backside of God's love and care. Okay? So who is cursed?
We are.
Y'all are, but
Let's go read it. Let's see who's cursed.
The serpent.
well, that, yeah.
The serpent's cursed, right?
Right.
Let's look at it in Genesis 3. The Lord, this is in verse 14 chapter 3. It says, the Lord God said to the serpent, because you have done this, cursed are you above all the cattle and all the living creatures of the field. Okay? So the serpent's cursed. All right? On your belly you will crawl, and dust you will eat all the days of your life. And I will put hostility between you and the woman, and between your offspring and her offspring. And he will strike your head, and you will strike, and you will strike his heel. To the woman he said, I will greatly increase your labor pains. With pain you will give birth to children. You will want to control your husband, but he will dominate you. So 2 things happen there, but no curse. He says you're going to have the pain of childbirth that is way more than you had before, and you're going to want to have control, and your husband is going to be in control. So he says you're in pain, and he is set now. This blessing of union now has a conflict about it. Okay? So one of the greatest things that God ever provided was a blessed union of husband and wife. And now that's going to be drawn into a real test every minute of every day, which I won't give testimony to tonight. But you can. All right. And he says to Adam, but to Adam he said, because you obeyed your wife, meaning you didn't obey me, you obeyed your wife, and ate from the tree about which I commanded you, you must not eat from it. The ground is cursed because of you. Okay? So now, the serpent is cursed because of God, but the ground is cursed because of Adam. Why is that significant?
He's going to have to labor.
Well, Adam came from the earth. So see, God had breathed life into this mud creature and made him into His own image. But now, earth is turned against earth. This is what He's saying here. Okay, so that the very essence, that your very essence, is now going to be the thing that gives you the most trouble. All right. And it's in the earth, but we continue to find out that man doesn't do very good with his own self. In fact, you can look through the whole Bible, and you won't find any man that did very good with his own life except for one. Remarkable, isn't it? Okay, you must not eat from. The ground is cursed because of you. In painful toil you will eat of it all the days of your life. So you ate of the thing I told you not to eat. And now every bite that you take, that you do eat, is going to be from your own toil. So you kind of did this to yourself. It will produce thorns and thistles for you, but you will eat the grain of the field. By the sweat of your brow you will eat food until you return to the ground. For out of it you were taken of the dust, and to dust you will return. So it goes on in verse 23. The Lord God expelled them from the orchard in Eden to cultivate the ground from which he had been taken, which was outside of Eden. When he drove them out, he placed on the eastern side of the orchard of Eden angelic sentries, or cherubim, who used the flame of a whirling sword to guard the way to the tree of life. Okay, so now they've been removed from the holy space. And what we want more than anything is to get back in. That's really what life is all about. How do we find our way back into that life where our purpose is secure, our relationships are secure, our work no longer is toilsome, but it holds another value for us? When you do a word study of work and worship in the Old Testament, you'll find that the words are the same. When you do a word study of work and worship, the Hebrew words for work and the Hebrew words for worship, you find that they're the same word. So in the garden, the work, what we call work, that Adam and Eve had to do was actually meant to be worship to God. Their activity of life is meant to be worship, okay? But then when they were removed, their work actually became this thing that was toilsome and probably didn't always result in worship to God. In fact, you can look through and begin to see that so much of what is done men trying to survive to make it to the next day before they die and return to dust is in a lot of ways doesn't resemble worship at all. It resembles slavery, war, oppression, all these various things that are done in order for you to survive and someone else not to survive. So this became the way of the world rather quickly. But over here, guarded by the cherubim, is this holy space that God made for us and wants us. He wants us back there, and we want back there. Okay. So is that making sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Come on, give me
No,
more than yeah.
goes ahead of you too much. Sin came in, so that the earth was cursed.
Yeah.
So from there on till Jesus comes back, the same pattern goes for everybody.
Well,
I'm getting ahead of you, so
Yeah.
we'll go ahead.
Yeah.
'Cause there's got to be a place.
well, let's just look some more at what God does, because He doesn't just these things happen and now He's got it in His head that He's going to wait forever for this to happen to correct the problem. In fact, in Genesis chapter 11, He's already at work trying to fix the problem. 11 or 12. Oh, I've done read so much today I can't even keep up.
Read that.
The story of Abraham. Okay.
Well, first of all, it shows the weakness of man, what Adam and Eve did.
Yeah.
That's a total picture of everybody.
It's the weakness of man.
And they might have been
But it's-
kings
but-
and prophets and all that, but they didn't know it.
Yeah, that's the Tower of Babel. I don't want to talk about it. But the weakness of man was deciding that simply that they weren't going to hear or they weren't going to act on what they have heard from God.
Okay, now,
So the central thing through all of this is, what does God say and how do we respond? Because as we move through and look at the priest that God sets aside and anoints, they fail miserably every time they do anything. Okay? So God is not after a solution at that particular time. But He sets all these things in motion, and we're able to see pretty clearly what He's doing. We just have to pay attention. So when God comes to Abraham, it says, "Now the Lord said to Abram, go out from your country, your relatives, your father's household." This is in Genesis 12. "To the land that I will show you. Then I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you." This is the second time we've seen where God's passing out blessing. First time's in the garden when He blesses his animate icons who are to do His priestly duties. And now He's blessing Abraham. Could Abraham be the next priest? Could he be the prophet, priest, king that God's about to let loose upon the world? "Then I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you, and I will make your name great, so that you will exemplify divine blessing." So now your life is going to be the epitome of what I'm doing in it and what I have for you. Okay? Eden. This is Eden. "I will bless those who bless you, but the one who treats you lightly, I must curse, so that all the families of the earth may receive blessing through you." So, Abram, you're going to be my priest. I'm going to bless you, and you are going to, how does he say it? "I will make your name great, so that you will exemplify divine blessing." So what's that mean? People are going to be able to see you as an example of who I am and what I do for people. You will exemplify this blessing. Okay? And then all the nations will be made great, because what you do is going to allow my blessing to flow to them. So God's not being stingy with the way that He is blessing His creation. He's being quite extravagant, but there has to be this place where heaven and earth meet for this to happen. this is beginning to become pretty clear. He had Eden and Adam and Eve. Well, they can't return to Eden because the tree of life is there. And if we go back as full of sin, sin will reign forever. So there's not the space yet, but there's the person in Abram. Okay? All right, but Abram doesn't do a very good job at that. As we will see, he kind of takes things into his own hands. God promises him a son, and it's not happening quick enough, so they go try to work this out with a Hagar, and of course Ishmael and Hagar are blessed because they hadn't heard the original promise. They hadn't been a part of God's original promise to Abram and Sarai. So they kind of do things. They forget what God said, or they're trying to force God's hand.
Talking to God, I can tell you.
Well, that's let's see. I want to.
Because the human.
Shoot, I mean, you talk to them all the time.
All right. So when we get to chapter 14 in Genesis, anybody remember the story? Anybody know the story of the 5 kings that go and attack the 4 kings? And one of the king of Sodom is attacked, and one of the people that were fighting in the battle came to Abram and said, "Hey, these kings just kidnapped your nephew Lot and all that he had, and they've carried him off." Okay, so this is way down in the southern end of what would be Israel, kind of toward, if you've got it, if you can get a picture, the Sinai Peninsula or the Suez Canal and Gaza and all that is. Okay, that's kind of where all this is. That's where Abraham is. Okay, so Abraham says, "Okay, can't have that." So he puts together 318 soldiers, and they go up and they divide and they conquer, and they get all the stuff back that these 5 kings had taken from these other kings, plus all the people back. Okay, so is this beginning to ring a bell? And so they chase these kings, these 5 kings, all the way past or almost to Damascus, which is about 100 miles if you were looking at it on a map. It's about 100 miles distance. So they chased these marauding kings 100 miles and took back everything that they'd stole and started back down south. Well, between his place and Damascus, he has to go by Shalem or Salem. Salem becomes a very important place. Salem is the same place that is Jerusalem. Okay, just hadn't developed its full name yet, but it will in a very short time. So he goes and he gets the stuff. On his way back, the king of Sodom comes out to meet him, but that's interrupted in the story by another king that comes out. Okay, out of this mountain where Salem is, and his name is, anybody know? Melchizedek. All right, so that we're going to look at Melchizedek, chapter 14, beginning with verse 17. After Abram returned from defeating this king, Kedorlaomer, how you say it? Come on. I'll take it. I can't say it. I got too much of a European in me to even speak this stuff. And the kings who were with him, the king of Sodom went out to greet Abram in the valley of Sheva, known as the King's Valley. Okay? Are you finding it? Genesis 14?
Yeah, I was in 7.
Verse 17. Now we're in verse 18.
I got
Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. Now he was the priest of the Most High God. Now this is the first word. This is the first time we find the word priest. Okay, and he's coming out of the mountain. Really, it turns out to be the mountain of God, Jerusalem, into the Valley of Kings to meet Abram, and he brings a blessing. Okay, he brings bread and wine, and he says he blessed Abraham. Okay, who blesses? So far it's God, right? Nobody else.
Right.
He blessed Abram. So now we know that Melchizedek understands that he truly is a priest of God. He has received a blessing from God, and he has passed that blessing on to Abram. Blessed be Abram, by the Most High God, creator of heaven and earth. Worthy of praise is the Most High God, who delivered your enemies into your hand. And that's it. That's it. Okay? And then this short little note. Abram gave Melchizedek a tenth of everything. And that's the end of the encounter that we have with Melchizedek. That's it. 3 short little verses, and one of them very short. And yet Melchizedek becomes so important all the way through the story about priests and the temple. Okay? And Abram, yeah. The tithe. Yeah. See, it is. It is where the tithe comes from. And why? Why is this so important? Why would there be a whole structure of religious thought built around this act of being a tenth?
Why is a tenth or why is the act?
No, why? Why would Abram give him a tenth of everything?
Because he's acting like Melchizedek is a form of God.
Okay, Melchizedek had given him the blessing of God. And Abram is so overwhelmed by this, he gives him a tenth of everything.
So are you saying why did he choose a tenth and not maybe half?
No, I'm not saying either. I'm saying that he does this. He does this to reciprocate the blessing. He gets bread and wine from Melchizedek. Okay? But he gets a blessing. Now see, we use that word blessing all the time. And we don't use it the way it's meant to be used, see? Because what Abraham is recognizing here is here's a man that has come, and he's the image of God here. Okay? He is carrying God's blessing. This is Eden come to me. So Abram already knows that he's been chosen to be a priest. Okay? Because he basically said the whole world's going to be blessed through you. So Abram knows this is what it's about. If I receive God's blessing in some sort of way, that means I release that blessing. As Melchizedek does, he receives it, but he passes his own and releases it to Abram. Okay, so here we have this great activity of the priest, the work of the priest, because that's what the work is the blessing that he provides. Okay. Is this all beginning to kind of add up between Adam and Eve and Abram and Melchizedek? Is this all beginning to kind of take shape? Because right on the heels of this, we come to a place where don't go too good for Abram. All right? So he makes a covenant with God. We're not even going to talk about that. But then beyond that covenant, what happens? Sarah's getting old. Oh, that promise God made is never going to happen until we kind of take matters in our own hands. You've been doing pretty good taking matters in your own hand. You raided and you conquered and you were blessed. Let's see what happens if we just take this into our own hands. And so she says, take my handmaid, okay, Gomer. Hagar, not Hagar. Gomer's the other one. That's the prostitute. I don't want to get them confused. And the whole thing, Ishmael and And that wasn't what God had planned, right? But he doesn't curse Hagar and Ishmael. God actually blesses them and says, you're going to be a great nation too. All right, but what happens now when, let's get on over to, we're way over here now, I think. Chapter 22 of Genesis. So we get to this place, all right? They had Ishmael, I say they, because the three of them were involved. Ishmael.
But by this time he's Abraham. The wording has changed.
That's correct. At the time of the covenant, his name was changed to Abraham. So he's gotten to this point now where he has his child of the promise, and God says, you can't keep him. You're going to have to sacrifice him. Now, why would he do that?
See how faithful he is.
Quite a test.
That's his faith.
It's tough, isn't it, to try to figure out exactly what's going on here?
His faith, according to my Bible, my new Bible.
Your new Bible with the
Right
notes?
here, it's got a question and answer. Why did God ask
Because it was
Abraham
to give God's
Yeah.
promise back to
sacrifice
God.
Isaac? He was testing his faith.
I would say
Or his
that there's a point at which you have to test your surrender. I don't think we always look at faith as surrender. But this is a point at which Abraham finds himself where he has to surrender his son, which means that he's having to surrender him. He knows as well as anything that his son's death is a substitutionary death for him too, because he's the child of the promise, and this won't carry on one day further once Isaac takes his last breath. And so everything that Abraham is on the chopping block with Isaac. He knows that and God knows that the only way that this ever comes about to mean anything for Abraham is that he surrender himself through this sacrifice. And he does. Right up until the point where he raises the knife and God stops him. But there still has to be something done to commemorate and to understand the death that Abraham has just undergone, because he's surrendered. Abraham's not around anymore. He has surrendered everything to God. It's totally in God's hands. And so God offers a sacrifice of a ram that he provides to show that, yes, this life that you had is gone. And if you will continue to listen to me and obey me, then you will have a life with me. That sacrifice covers the sin and the life that is dead in that sin. And the life that you live with me is the life that you'll have. It's no different than the one that we have in Jesus. Jesus, when you look at the parallel of Jesus isn't Isaac in the story. Jesus is the ram in the story. We're Isaac in that story. And so in that, Abraham begins to understand a little more clearly what this priesthood is all about. It's not simply about blessing where you receive a good thing and you release a good thing. Sometimes you receive the good thing, but what is required in the interim is the releasing of your life. That's where the blessing is. For your life to be totally with God's. That's what Abraham has been called to offer. That's what later the children of Israel are called to be. See? Does that make sense? Kind of, sort of?
Say that again. Say it one more time.
he is learning what this is going to be all about.
Amen.
That this is a surrender to God. The blessing of God is a surrender to God.
Amen.
And that it is possible to do so and not lose your life, but to gain your life. See?
Because it's a spiritual thing.
It is a spiritual
It's
thing.
all spiritual. I mean,
But
he didn't have to do all of that.
but it's
God had to test his
it's
heart.
spiritual, but our life with God and our work with God is spiritual.
That's right.
So everything, even the material, has a spiritual meaning. So they're inseparable. Heaven and earth coming together. See? We tend to want to compartmentalize those things in our life where we can put on our Sunday speech on Sunday and then use hells and dams all week long and feel okay because we've separated the two. That's just a minor example. Okay? But what Abraham is learning is I can't separate the two because when I do, I die. My life is totally in his. Had it not been, I would be dead right now, see. Had I not surrendered everything, Isaac would be dead. But I surrendered everything, and so Isaac is alive. And so the promise of God in life is alive in my life. The blessing that God has bestowed upon me is alive in my life. My role as a priest to the nations is alive because I surrendered it all.
So if we don't be under the spiritual umbrella, we're dead.
Correct. So yeah, let's
We still got our flesh, but we're dead spiritually.
Yeah.
There's nothing happening.
So let's jump forward a little bit to that, and we'll come back again. Jesus said, "What's the fulfillment of all the law and the prophets?" He quotes 2 Bible verses when he's asked that. Rabbi, I forget the question.
God with all your heart,
Soul and strength. That's
and love your neighbor as yourself.
Yeah. Okay.
Good.
So let's sit on that blessing thing for a minute. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. Why? Because he has blessed you. They were standing in the desert and they didn't have a thing to worry about because God was going to take care of them. In fact, so much so that whenever the word wilderness is used in the Old Testament, they see it as a time of refreshing because God's there taking care of them. So God is blessing, and we will do what? How do we bless God back? We love him. Okay? And then what do? You love your neighbor in the same way that you're wrapped up in this thing with God, so that you're passing along the blessing to your neighbor. So Jesus says everything is summed up in this reciprocating nature of God moving through what is both heaven and earth, his people, and moving into a world that needs to know that through total surrender, you receive this. Make sense? Yeah. Yeah.
Well, so there's a knowledge that he gained there. Okay. I believe you always refer to it as you can't unring the bell.
Right. That's
Okay?
right.
And when you turn away from that, you're not saying that the truth has changed, only that you deny the truth.
Yeah, that's right.
And then there's no blessing in that. That's true when you die.
When you ignore, or how did you say it earlier, twist the Word of God, trivialize the Word of God, then all of those things only results in one possibility, and that is for things to go wrong. It happened with It happened with Adam and Eve. It happens again at the Tower of Babel. Okay, it happens again before the flood. Nobody's paying attention to God before the flood. It happens to Abram when he decides he's going to come up with a solution for his heir on his own. Every time God says something, God says, I said it and I mean it. Look at the stars in the sky. I meant it. Look at, the birds in the air, and boy, when we get to the end of Job, you're going to hear a lot about this when I get to that part in my sermon series.
Oh, this must have happened over hundreds of years.
It did.
If everybody's descended from Adam and Eve.
Yeah, all of this has taken a long time.
Yeah.
And it's still happening.
And it's still happening to some degree.
Well, not like it's happening
Yeah.
here. We still got to
So,
follow the will of the Father. We can't live out there by
Yeah.
ourselves without Him.
so Abram's offspring grow up. They wind up in Egypt. They're there for a long time as slaves. And God chooses Moses to go and set his people free. Moses is serving how in that process? As a prophet, he's going to speak what God says. As a priest, because he is mediating between God and his own people in this. Okay? He's not really a king at that point, but he's carrying two of the roles. Or he should have. But what happens? God calls Moses, and God says, I'm going to send you back, and I'm going to use you to talk to Pharaoh, and your people are going to walk out of there and come to this land that I promised them. And Moses says, no, I can't do it.
They're going to kill me.
I can't do it. They're going to kill me. I'm not the guy. And so 3 times God does this, and Moses finally says, look, you just got to find somebody else. Until he finally gets mad at him about it and says, look, your brother's on his way here right now. We'll get him to do it. Okay? He'll speak. I'll speak to you. And this is God. It's amazing how much he'll put up with. And this whole episode with Aaron and Moses just illustrate it in spades. I'll talk to you. You talk to Aaron. Aaron will talk to the Pharaoh. And I'll get this done. Okay? So he says, okay, that's how we're going to do it. So the first thing he does is, he says, go, you and Aaron and the elders of the tribes, you go to Pharaoh and tell him to let you go. What happens? Aaron and Moses go to talk to Pharaoh, but they don't take the 12 elders.
They don't say what?
They don't take the elders with them. And you know what Pharaoh said?
I didn't know they have them.
Yeah, no, they had elders of tribes ever since Joseph and since his brothers. So he says, you know what? The only problem with your people is that they're lazy. So they got to make more bricks, and they got to do it with less raw materials. Okay, so when they didn't do what God said, as the priest of God, things only got worse for their people.
The ground was cursed.
Okay. Yeah, same way. Yeah, if you don't do it the way I say, it's never going to work out right. This is the message over and over and over again. And so now they have to go back, and of course they do, and finally they're released. Okay, and Aaron's line, they're all Levites, so they, as God's given them his instructions, they're going to be the priest. Okay, that handle everything. And Moses, he missed out on the best job ever because he doesn't get to be the priest. He's got to administrate this whole mess, which we find out later is a disaster. Okay, so as this is happening, God tells them, you go out to the mountain. What mountain is it that they go to? The same one that Melchizedek came out of to meet Abraham. The mountain of God. Yeah. Go out. Well, it's in the same neighborhood. Go out and meet me at this mountain. So he goes, and he's back and forth up and down this mountain, carrying messages. He winds up being a priest. He's carrying this message from God to the people, And so they respond, and Moses has to go back up the mountain and tell them what the people said. He's really taking on this role as priest. Okay, only the last time he goes up. No, the second to last time he goes up. It's the second to last time? Let's look it up. I'm getting confused now. Let's see, 32. Let's see, the last time that Moses went up,
He came down with unbroken tablets.
he goes up there and he stays for a long time, 40 days. And during that time, what happens during that time? Anybody recall?
The golden calf.
The golden calf. Instead of his brother Aaron being a priest for God, the people who he's mediating for with God talk him into being a priest for some calf that they're going to build. Okay. All right. So this is our first introduction into the priesthood when Israelites are in charge. Okay. They don't do a very good job. So in that, Moses is up there and he's talking to God. Let's look at chapter 32, verse 7. Moses took the tent and pitched it outside the camp at a good distance from the camp, and he called to the tent of the meeting. Anyone seeking the Lord would go out there.
Where do you go?
Chapter 32. No, wait. That's 33. I'm sorry. Start at verse 11. Chapter 32. No, wait. No, go back to verse 7. That's where I was started a while ago. Verse 32. That's where I wanted to go. Exodus, yeah.
I was a little confused.
The Lord spoke to Moses, "Go quickly descend, because your people you have brought up from the land of Egypt have acted corruptly. They have quickly turned aside from the way that I commanded them. They have made for themselves a molten calf and have bowed down to it and sacrificed to it and said, 'These are your gods, O Israel, which brought you out up from the land of Egypt.' Then the Lord said to Moses, 'I have seen this people. Look, what a stiff-necked people they are. Now leave me alone so that my anger can burn against them and I can destroy them, and I will make from you a great nation.'" Okay? So now he's ready to make Moses prophet, priest, king. But Moses sought the favor of the Lord his God and said, "O Lord, why does your anger burn against your people whom you have brought out from the land of Egypt with great power and with a mighty hand? Why should the Egyptians say, 'For evil has led them out to kill them in the mountains and to destroy them from the face of the earth'? Turn from your burning anger and relent of this evil against your people." He just called God's actions evil. "Remember Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, your servants, to whom you swore by yourself and told them, 'I will multiply your descendants like the stars of heaven, and all this land that I have spoken about I will give to your descendants, and they will inherit it forever.' Then the Lord relented over the evil that he had said he would do to his people. Moses turned and went down from the mountain with the 2 tablets of the testimony in his hands. The tablets were written on both sides, front and back. Now the tablets were the work of God, and the writing was the writing of God engraved on the tablets. When Joshua heard the noise of the people as they shouted, he said to Moses, Is it the sound of war in the camp?" And Moses said, "It is not the sound of those who shout victory, nor is it the sound of those who cry because they are overcome, but the sound of singing I hear." When they approached the camp, saw the calf, Moses became angry. He threw the tablets from his hands and broke them into pieces at the bottom of the mountain. He took the calf that they had made and burned it in the fire, ground it, poured it in powder, poured it out on the water, and made the Israelites drink it. So in this we find Aaron was to be the priest. Moses ultimately winds up being the priest. And the last time that he goes up the mountain to speak with God, you may recall that he comes down and his face is shining. Okay? Because he's been in the radiance of God. Or it's because this is truly the way a priest looks. When he's given instructions on making the priest's clothes when they go into the tabernacle, he describes for them white clothing covered with jewels, gold, big old gold plate on the top, on the front of this crown turban thing that they would wear, had a gold sash around their waist. They glistened in the sun. Okay, they would shine like the sun. And here Moses is. He doesn't have to put on any clothes to shine like the sun. He's shining the way that God is intending to see his priest. Okay? He doesn't go into the tabernacle. He's not ever allowed to do that. And the tabernacle's arranged much like the Garden of Eden. There's the garden, there's the holy place where God is. And then there's the area that surrounds that. But Moses actually appears and functions more of the priest than even the priest that was assigned that role by God, Aaron. Okay? So we begin to see that what matters is not the title that someone may have been given, or even title by responsibility of what they've been given, but who is actually doing it. Who is actually being the priest. Okay? That's what matters to God. Who's actually doing the thing. In fact, in that last trip up, God still wants to get rid of them, and Moses says, take my life. Not theirs. Just do away with me. He's probably tired of dealing with them. But no, God carries on. Now when we look in the New Testament, Paul is not a stranger to these things. When Paul says that you put on Christ, what is he saying? No, to clothe yourself with Christ is to do what? It's what?
Is it a garment of praise?
Well, Jesus was the great high priest, right? And as we surrender to him, his sacrifice makes it possible for us to live with him. And we take on his likeness. We put on the priest clothes. So that what the world sees in a believer is not just somebody that's saved. It's somebody that's functioning as a priest to the world. Peter described us as a royal priesthood. Okay? A royal priesthood means that you're kings who are priests. You're kings and queens who are priests. So Peter goes to the trouble of combining for us the two roles that God expects of believing Christians. That we put on Christ, okay, as we would put on the priest's robes because he's the high priest. And then we go about functioning as that priest so that we are reciprocating to God the blessing that he gives us. That certainly is part of that is our salvation. Okay, but there's other ways in which God has chosen to bless each and every one of us, separately and uniquely in a lot of ways. And then we're able to turn and offer that to our neighbor. Okay? Loving our neighbor, like you mentioned before. So from Adam and Eve all the way to the new Adam, see? Not just that we've been born new, but that he is the new Adam. He's the new priest over the paradise of God. He sits at the right hand of God. Okay? When everything's at peace, Psalm 110 says that the Lord, David says, my Lord sits at the right hand of Yahweh. Okay? But when they go out in the battle, Yahweh is at the right hand of my Lord, meaning that they have these roles that allow for Jesus to be our priest even then. Even David understood it then, that his role as king was also a role of priest, because his Lord was that. Does that help you understand any of that? It's so central. It's so central to the whole message of the gospel that we really should understand it. That God began all of this in the very beginning. And we can carry the whole thing to Revelation, and you get to chapter 21 and 22, and God says, and here we are. This is where I wanted you the whole time. There's a river of life running through this great place. It's the same river of life that we had way back when. It makes a full circle. Only we're more as a result. We're not only made in the image of God in the way that Genesis describes it, we're also made in the image of God and bearing the image of His Son. So it's more than what it was, even in the beginning.
So it just boils down to the fact that God has to be first in our life, period.
Period.
If we want any peace or get
Yeah.
And it's not going to be an easy road unless we...
No, it's going to be a disappointing road for most of us, but God doesn't... He's proven Himself several times. There's only been one time that in this whole priest narrative where God said, you're not going to be priest anymore. And we've already talked about that in our study in 1 Samuel. He told Eli, what is wrong with you people? I've said all these things. I chose your family. And here you are stealing from the treasury and having sex with the women that are taking care of the temple. I'm done with y'all. And so that's the end. We finally got to the last one, Abiathar. Solomon killed Abiathar, and that was the end of the Levites as priests. And God established a new line with Zadok. And that became the new line out of the tribe of Judah, which is significant. So that's the only time where God just finally said, enough is enough. And it's because none of this works without the priest. None of it works until there's this place where heaven is meeting earth. And the tabernacle represented that in the worship that occurred there, the work that occurred there. And on this side of the cross, the temple's who? We're the temple. Yeah. Yeah, we're the temple. We're the living sacrifice. See, Jesus has made this possible. Where He says, you Pharisees, you're so concerned about how clean the potty is on the outside and how pretty all that looks. He says, why are you so concerned with that? That's not what makes you a person, defiles a person. It's what comes out of the person. Okay? And so if you're a temple and what comes out of it is defiling, like it was for Eli and his sons, then don't need you. See, that's the thing. If there's a dark side to all of this that we're seeing, that's the dark side, is that we can't just be whoever we decide we want to be in the name of justice or in the name of this or in the name of that. That's not what God allows for. He has spoken a word, and then if we follow that word, it works out pretty well. Because we understand, we're able to have an understanding of God, a wisdom of God. That's His will. But the more we try to monkey around with it, what normally happens is this becomes a fiction. Because we can make it say whatever we want it to say.
That's what's happening today.
Yeah, and once we do that, then where do you go Where do you go to find God? Where do you truly go? You going to get on your knees and pray every night and think you're going to get it all by that way? No. If that would have been the case, this wouldn't have survived for 6,000 years.
I think he's
See?
fixing to do. I think he's very upset today. He's fixing to lower the boom.
I don't think
Well-
so. Not yet.
No, I didn't say yet. But
When we look at, but who would he be angry with?
So Earth living is going to get a lot worse before.
Who would God be angry with?
those that are not in his will, doing what he so
Those who are
desires
so
for us to
away.
do.
Is his anger toward the lost?
No.
The false teachers. The ones who claim to know Christ but really aren't really. serving
That's
him.
the ones, isn't it?
Yep.
That's the ones you hear about from Jesus. That's the ones that John writes
So he's
about.
not angry at us if we just become saved and all of a sudden we just live the way we want.
No, that's being false. That's being the thing about it is, see, we are all prophet, priests, and kings.
Mm-hmm.
So what we speak about this and about anything that has to do with our surrender to God and our life with Him, it matters. It matters not only to us, but it matters to everyone else. Too much is given, much will be required. Same thing. We've been given much. If your total surrender and faith is in Christ, then what are you lacking?
Nothing.
So you've been given much, everything. Okay. So what we do with that and how we handle that becomes, this becomes cosmic in nature, really. Because you don't know. We're not allowed to know, I don't think, to the whole degree as to how much our lives matter in this grand scheme of things that's going on. Don't cry on me when I speak, okay? But
we're stewards of everything that belongs to God, and everything belongs to God. Even at the beginning, the work that was given to Adam was to be steward over the things that belonged to God. Okay, he was to care for things. He was to name the animals. He was to be responsible for the things that belong
that's
to
right.
God.
And not only was it work,
And I don't think it's any different than now. As we walk through this life, okay, so we're given this knowledge and this responsibility, and it's our place to.
so let's think about it this way.
The best stewards possible.
What is salvation? A recreation.
I think it's renewing the relationship with God.
Yeah. But you can't do that as to who you are. We're made new. I preached on that for 13 weeks. Come on, y'all, please. We are a new creation. That's what we become, because the old one can't relate. We're totally outside that. We can't fix any of that. So we're made new. Okay? And in that newness, we get new clothes. Okay? We get priest clothes. Okay? We got new work, because our work now is worship. Everything that we do is offered as an act of worship. Meaning everything that we think is offered as an act of worship. Because our thinking leads to something that is going to be lived out in the world, and it should be an act of worship. So it solves a lot of problems when we live that way. It's when we do like Abraham, and we do like Eli's sons, and we do like children of Israel, where we know what God's saying, but that's why He says you're stiff-necked people. You can't do it. But He did allow us a high priest that solves all these problems for us when we surrender. And the remarkable nature of it is this. God knew that Ashley Bell's life was going to end the way it ended. since before the foundation of the world. And what did he do in the meantime? He provided for her a community of priests. And along the way, a few of those priests functioned well. And she became a priest herself. Okay? Surrendering to God doesn't destroy our weaknesses. Surrendering to God doesn't do any of those things. Okay? But it makes us into something new.
Well, we begin to grow in His grace too. But we can't be part-time born again either. It's a full-time job.
No, that's right. And
that's where we get in trouble.
Yes.
Where I get in trouble.
Yes. But life still is hard.
Yep, it is.
And when it gets too hard, God's already made a way.
But we have
And
trouble.
a lot of people know that way, and more people don't. See what I'm saying? And I thank Him that there was people who possessed the integrity of their faith.
We also
that made a
have
difference.
the power of the Holy Spirit in us
Yes.
that can help us and is there to help us along this path.
And that's not some superimposed supernatural power. That power is our ability to hear and to listen. Just like, and to act, of course, yeah.
See, hear, and act.
Because it has no value outside of the action. That was some of the problem.
I heard on the radio going home, I listened to this end time show, and this guy on there, this preacher on there said the American thinks that we're on a cruise ship. And he said, I got news for you, we're on a battleship.